welcome to Note Doctors. My name is Paul.
My name is Jen.
My name is Ben.
And we are your hosts. We are all university music theory instructors who are passionate about music theory and music theory instruction. In this podcast, we will be talking about all things theory with some of the best music theory teachers in the country. If you want to know more about music theory and the most effective and innovative ways to teach it, this is the podcast for you. So for today's episode, we're doing something a little bit differently. Rather than having a guest that we get to interview for the episode, we are going to do a little bit of a kind of a roundup, a roundtable response to SMT. If you're not a theory nerd, you probably aren't aware that the Society for Music Theory just had its annual conference, and because of COVID-19, it was entirely virtual. So it did not meet at a city or at a university, but it was completely online, and there were tons of papers, presentations, guest speakers, symposiums, chats, Slack rooms, all sorts of things. Our vocabulary is expanding, I feel like, by the day with all these terms.
True.
But we thought we would just kind of talk about some of the pedagogy topics that were presented that we were able to attend and engage with, and kind of give a little report on what we thought was great, what we thought worked well. I am actually an SMT virgin. Well, actually no longer, because I, of course, am a composer, and composers go to conferences. The way composition conferences work is the only way you go to a conference is if you get selected to go, is if your piece gets picked. So it's like just the winners. But with theory, everyone goes. It's like a big party. And so this was my first SMT experience, though it wasn't the real deal. I didn't get to hang out with the sage theorists and get to hang out like that.
Us.
Or you. That's right. Or either of
right,
you.
That's what
right.
would really be.
Right. That's what would really be happening.
I would call myself a sage at this point. Maybe Ben.
Yeah,
No, I'm not a sage theorist by any means.
But so I thought, like, Jen and Ben, you're veterans of SMT, virtual now, and of course face to face. What are your thoughts on how it went?
I had kind of mixed feelings about the format, and I can talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to say, first of all, that this is the most pedagogy topics and sessions I remember ever seeing at the national conference. I don't know, Ben, if you would agree. And I don't have like a scientific, I haven't studied every program from every year to back that up, but just there were so many pedagogy topics, and I found that really, I thought that was really wonderful. And I was happy to see that. I felt, on the one hand, it was kind of great to be able to like do laundry while attending SMT, or go make lunch in my own kitchen. I missed, of course, the normal, going out for meals together and just sitting around and talking about how things are going in our classrooms and with our research. I definitely missed that time that we normally would get. And even though they tried to create that, I still felt like it's not the same, obviously, as sharing a meal and everybody kind of, telling their stories and laughing and all of those things. But I also I went to way more sessions simply because none of them conflict. Mm-hmm. And I could kind of easily pick and choose or pause if I needed to, and all of those kinds of things. So I could pause and take notes if I wanted to write something down. Mm-hmm. So there were bonuses. And then, of course, the downside is always missing out on being around people. That's 2020 in a nutshell. Right. Ben, what did you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with the number of pedagogy sessions and seemingly a lean over more towards pedagogy initiatives in terms of diversity, inclusion, and the like. That was really nice to see, I thought. But also just from a broader perspective, just pedagogy in general. A lot of fantastic speakers, a lot of fantastic topics. And it seemed to have a really fruitful discussion, and a lot of the sessions and a lot of the Q&As were really well done. I know a lot of people said they liked the way that the respectfulness and the integrity of the Q&A was really good, because people were typing in, obviously, their questions. So you didn't have this what sometimes occurs is that one person dominates, I guess, the Q&A often, or you have something that's not really the topic of the session. It's a little bit tangential, but then it dominates the Q&A for some reason.
Right. And it's not even a question. It's just a,
Right.
just a statement.
So I think the decorum in the Q&A was good, and that was a plus. And yeah, as Jen said, and as we've said before on the podcast, the hallway conversations, I think a lot of the following year's SMT presentations organically grow out of like the hallway conversations from the previous year's SMT or interest groups where you say, oh, actually I was working on this and I was working on this. If we were to unite our projects, we could really do something for next year's SMT, or a joint session or a panel comes together. And I sincerely hope that other people have come together, whether it's through interest groups or just groups of mutual friends, to still continue those projects, because that's something that really energizes me and galvanizes the next year's worth of projects and exploration. So yeah, it was cool. I really enjoyed being able to rewind and replay, and I will confess that I watched some of the presentations on a 1.5x because I only had a certain amount of time, or the kids temporarily fell asleep and I had a 20-minute window to watch something that was actually 30 minutes, so I tried to go either time and a half or 2x and get through it, which I thought was actually really nice. I could still get through some more material faster. So that's my confession of SMT this year.
Well,
I think that's great.
Yeah, that's how I think we all listen to our podcasts, is at least 1.5 at a time. But and I will confess that I did not listen to you, Ben, in your presentation at 1.5 because you actually co-presented. You had a session, and so maybe just give us a little plug for what it was about and what was your experience kind of on the other side of this event, where you were presenting and having to prepare the materials and things like that.
I thought the experience was really nice being a presenter, a panelist this year. We talked about Fidelio. My partner is Graham Hunt in that project. We're talking about form and also voice leading and motives together, and how both of those things contribute to the dramatic action of Fidelio. So if you're interested, feel free to watch our presentation. It's still available. And our Q&A went really well, I thought. We had questions from Michael Buckler and William Kaplan, among others. So it was really, really nice to get the Q&A going and have people still able to watch our video post-conference. Technically, I can still make a statement about our video. It's still up.
That's one of the things about being online, and it seemed like a trend with a couple of the presentations was about expanding kind of the reach of what we're doing. All right, so going beyond just a journal or a conference where it's one and done, and using the internet, using those technologies to kind of leverage our scholarship and to share with the wider world what we're really doing.
Do we want to jump into some of the pedagogy sessions?
Yeah, let's jump in. What did we think? I know you have a bunch of notes, Jen. So
I do. I'm a note taker.
Jen's the best note taker out of all of us.
By far.
Well, the first one was the session about Gary Karpinski's oral skills acquisition text, which is 20 years old.
Yeah.
Happy anniversary.
I know. It was great to see him there, and it's always great to hear him talk. And of course, that book has been important for me in my teaching too. So I thought that was a really great session. Yeah,
I like being able to come back to some of those quotes. It's not to make it too religious, but there's something about that text. There's this kind of well, it's not like a Bible, but it's like it's a sacred text where every time you go back to it, you get something else out of it. It's like the Michael Rogers Pedagogy book. I feel the same way about that. Every time I reread that, I'm like, oh, that little nugget. I never noticed that. And I feel like with the Karpinski text, there's that same type of relevance and kind of inspiration that you can get each time you kind of return to it.
For sure. I thought it was interesting. So the first presenter talked a lot about, he had done kind of gathering information about how various people teach oral skills and what they teach. And one of the things he pointed out is that even though oral skills acquisition says that discrete tasks like listening for intervals or chord quality, that kind of thing, are actually not a great way to acquire that information or to acquire that skill, that most of us still do them when we teach. I know, I mean, in Oral Skills 1, we do some interval drills. Yeah. Do you guys do that kind of drill in your Oral Skills classes?
Yeah, and basic intervals, you know, harmonic and melodic. Yeah, even though we try not to focus on that and focus on the function of those intervals rather than just hearing them as isolated events, they're still part. And, you know, rhythmic dictation, that's another thing that he kind of mentions that we should not overemphasize, but that's something that I use, especially dealing with singers where rhythm is a deficiency.
Now, it's always a melody. They're always hearing more than just a rhythmic element.
Yes.
Although I've actually wondered about that sometimes because, you know, we are training songwriters at DBU, and so they need to know how to write out percussion lines or to, you know, I mean, rhythm is actually one of the things that they struggle with the most when they get into trying to transcribe their own songs. Rhythm is often the most complicated problem that they have. So I don't know. It's an interesting and challenging question. In part, I think that we do discrete interval drills in our oral skills classes, mostly because it's convenient and it's in the textbook, right? And like, I'm not sure that I have a much better reason for it than that.
It's easy to assess.
Yeah.
I had brought up in a TF meeting the possibility of reducing the amount of intervals training that we do. And I got kind of a significant pushback from the TFs themselves. So I kind of left it alone temporarily, but it's always time to return to things, you know, and keep refining and keep thinking about it. And even if you have, I also thought, my thought in regard to that was about styles that place rhythm as a higher component of the style, I guess, you know what I mean, versus like harmony, let's say. Right. I mean, would it be fairer to those styles to represent it accurately, and the way you go about writing it down or the way you go about listening to it, you should probably reflect that stylistic kind of priority, or I don't know, I'm not wording that very well, but you know, to put rhythm at the top is not always a bad thing.
Right. And I think, I mean, he of course argues that we should teach rhythm and teach how to notate rhythm, just not kind of as an isolated thing.
Right.
So,
but it goes back to the way that we're taught. I'm sure we all were taught how to hear intervals and basic, you know, rhythmic dictation. And I'm sure your TFs are similar in that situation, Ben. We're like, yeah, I learned, you know, Here Comes the Bride. That's a perfect fourth.
Right.
Do to fa, right? No. But it's really hard to unlearn that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of TFs, in this session, when we went into our breakout rooms, I was the only non-student in my room. Everyone else was a student. And I thought that was really fantastic. It's possible that they were able to be there because it was virtual this year. That might have made a difference in access for a lot of people. They didn't have to pay for a hotel or a plane ticket or those kinds of things. But it also made me think about the fact that so much of our oral skills instruction is relegated to teaching fellows, teaching assistants, people who are first-year teachers sometimes, or who have never been in a classroom before. And it made me think about, like, why? Why is that our setup? Why are first-year teachers not teaching Theory 3? And instead, they're teaching Oral Skills 1. And what does that say about our priorities for what is most important, you know? I don't know. What do you guys think?
It makes me think of Jenny Snodgrass when she was given
the
choice.
Same thing, Ben.
Oral Skills 1. She asked for Oral Skills 1 of all the things in the world. And yeah, it's really telling. I mean, I try to, when I make the TF schedule, I guess, for UNT, I try to mix the experienced TFs with the younger. That way there's a community of teacher learners, I guess, kind of sense going on, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, do we think that it's that people don't want to teach it? I don't know. I like to teach oral skills personally.
Yeah, I do too.
I like teaching both written theory and oral skills. I'm a lot like Jenny. I would pick oral skills 1. I did the math recently and it was like 32 or 33 sections of oral skills 1 across my career. So a lot of oral skills 1s, and I love it. I still love it every single time. And I don't know, in some ways I thought if there are people out there who don't love it or who don't want to teach it, and that's why that's our system, that's kind of sad. That's not a good reason to me.
Right. It could be what you were saying earlier, Jen, about the history of pedagogy itself. And when you view oral skills as a supplement or a lab section or a reinforcement of written theory, automatically you're not placing it on kind of the same pedagogical level.
That's true.
Certainly that's got to play a part in it. Whether it's subconscious or conscious, you can debate that, but
that's true.
Right.
So for our podcast listeners who were not present for our pre-recorded discussion about this, I mentioned that in one of the papers that I heard in one of the history of pedagogy sessions, they talked about how oral skills began as a sort of reinforcement for written theory and was never really conceived of even as a way of teaching oral perception. And that leaves the question, or begs the question, like, do we teach oral perception now? I think we do to some extent, but I think we also still use it as a kind of support mechanism for teaching written theory as well. Right. And you're right, if you view it as, kind of a lab component to music theory, it makes sense that that's where you're going to put your new teachers, right?
Right.
Overseeing the lab.
Right. There's no society for oral skills. It's society for theory, music theory.
That's true.
And everything that it's like, theory textbooks, they're called harmony, right? Harmony gets this place at the top. Yeah, I wonder about skill, because that's what, not to be too cynical, but maybe there are people that don't have the skills or are nervous about not being able to hear things or play things and things like that, because I remember being so nervous my first time teaching introduction to oral skills and having to sing in front of them and practicing my little solfege patterns over and over, and of course I walk in and they know nothing, and so but I was so nervous that they were going to call me out on every little error that I made. So I think that is a possibility. That there is, people are not as comfortable. They can hide behind, the theory teaching. But even still, thinking of the lab component at my university, if they don't pass theory 3 or they fail theory 3, they cannot move on to oral skills 4 until they've passed theory 3 and are in theory 4. Oral skills is always concurrent or perhaps trailing with theory. Right. It's never
Same
in
here.
front. It's never you can never be in theory 2 and oral skills 3, because oral skills 3 is supplementing or is we're learning how to hear the topics that you were learning in the real theory class, theory 3. So I don't know really how to get around that.
Air quotes. You put that in air quotes.
Right, air quotes. Right. Yeah, please don't, no angry emails.
Yeah. I mean,
for sure.
If we have faculty colleagues out there who feel that they lack those skills, I would say, to people listening who are training graduate students, it's critically important that they have those skills, because that is a major element of what we do. And some of us end up at big research universities. UNT is a big research university, and some people end up on the faculty at UNT, like Ben. But some people end up on the faculty at a, liberal arts, small private university like mine. And, me and I have another full-time colleague, and we're the whole show. So, us, and we have a few adjunct friends, and we don't have TFs or TAs. So we both are teaching oral skills every semester. I wouldn't want it any other way. But, if you're training people to do that work, they're likely going to be doing that work. And so, pushing them hard to build those skills in grad school, I think, is a really important thing. And at UNT, I was pushed really hard in my pedagogy class on the oral skills side of things, and I've always been grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. And viewing oral skills not as a stepping stone to something else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you teach oral skills as an underling or as a junior faculty. But then, when you get tenure or when you move up, then you get, the real classes. I think that stigma is totally out of bounds.
Yeah.
And, unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, to me, oral skills is the most practical tool that we give our students. It's the one I use the most as a performer, for sure, when I'm singing or playing or whatever. It's definitely the strongest, the skill I use the most out there, sort of in the real musical world. And again, I'm putting that in quotations,
Right.
so we don't get any other angry emails.
By the way, we've never gotten one email,
No.
good or bad, so I don't know what we're worried about.
Yeah.
But I was, before we started recording, I mentioned that, or actually Ben, you had mentioned that I'd done a survey with my theory pedagogy class about how important is music theory, and then how important is oral skills. It was 2 different polls, and more students thought that oral skills was actually more important than music theory. And in my class, it's largely music ed and music therapy majors, and it makes perfect sense that oral skills would be the most important, most useful topic, even more than theory in their own work and their life.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Once you get beyond those basic fluency tasks in music theory, obviously I think it's all important, otherwise I wouldn't want to teach it, but those basic fluency tasks are the ones that educators and therapy people, that's what they're using every day. I don't know that they're sitting down and thinking about the deeper meaning in the form of Bach's Crucifixus, maybe, but maybe not. And so I think, I mean, obviously our whole job isn't just to give them like practical job skills. We're not a technical school,
Right.
but I do think it's valuable to think about what we focus on and what they'll use later on.
Yeah, I've actually kind of conceived, as I told you all before we started recording, I've always been an oral first person where I prefer to hear things first, and I consider myself an audio learner through and through. I've kind of thought of my theory teaching as a supplement to the oral. I've actually kind of conceived it the complete opposite way before, because
I love that.
in the freshman year at UNT, oral skills is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and theory is in the middle of that on a Tuesday, Thursday. So it actually made a lot of sense to me to kind of flip that paradigm and think about the oral part first, that we do a lot of just neutral syllable singing and things like that in the theory class before talking about the written version of anything. So maybe that's something that'll take off in the next couple of years, and people can kind of see it both ways,
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I have thought many times this semester about how we can't sing in my oral skills classroom because of safety. And so the original plan was to, not have class for as long every day, or, have certain days that are dedicated to singing and we meet outside or we meet online. And we have done that, but I'm still meeting class as long every single day, and we're doing tons of dictation, and I still always feel like I don't have enough time. I have many times kind of wished for the days of Monday, Wednesday, Friday oral skills at UNT, because you just could do so much more skill building with 3 hours a week over 2. So there was the poster session, the
Poster
pedagogy
session.
and cognition
That's right.
poster
Yes,
session, which was
yes.
great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I kind of wish that was a full-length session, to be honest with you, because I really enjoyed what everyone had to say.
I did too. There was the paper on. Well, I loved these guys are Texas guys, so we know them from TSMT. But the guys who did the paper on cadences, like taking cadences away from how we describe form and how we talk about form as being the only measure of whether or not a phrase has ended. And I loved how at the beginning they were like, "We feel uncomfortable about how we teach form," and I was
Big
like,
meme with the shocked face.
I know.
Dum, dum, dum.
And I feel the same way. I felt that way many times, where I'm saying like a cadence is how you end a phrase, and a phrase only ends if it ends with a cadence. And then I feel like I'm being dishonest with them, because I fully know that that would make Beethoven phrases or Brahms phrases that are like 4 and 5 pages of music, and that's ridiculous. And it also rules out a lot of things that feel like cadences in popular music and jazz, but wouldn't have the same harmonic function as what we're teaching them in that moment, which is 1 or 5. Right. And of course, there's a lot of ending on 1 and 5 in popular music and jazz and all kinds of styles. But there's also moments like there are tons of internal plagal cadences in popular music, and there's even endings on 4 in the middle of phrases. I have a colleague who calls that a plagal half cadence.
Well, doesn't that go back to the hearing versus the written, the oral versus the theory? I mean, yeah, on paper, 5-1, that's a cadence, but listen to a pop song that doesn't even have 1. Like there's pop songs that doesn't have a 1 chord.
Yeah, the whole way. Yeah,
the whole way through.
And jazz is so like 2-5 heavy.
Right.
That you might get the whole way through a jazz chart and never see a 1.
Right. Does that mean there's never a cadence in that Taylor Swift song? Well, that's absurd. There's never a moment of rest or arrival. So,
Yeah, I enjoyed that paper. And it did make me think, I was ironically teaching cadences these couple weeks in Theory 1 while I heard that paper. And I thought, well, that's pretty much what I said in class. And I did feel kind of bad about it when I said it. So I'm right there with them.
I'm right there with you. I had just wrote to John and Brian.
Yeah.
The day before we were recording this, telling them how much I enjoyed what they had to say and the way they outlined that, the way, boundary detection, for example, was great. And the ending, I think Brian was the one who actually read this text. Obviously, it's a joint paper, talking about how the focus is not on the theoretical apparatus for kids. I love that. I just thought, yes, please give me more. Give me another 10 minutes. Can you not stop there, please? I just thought yes, to all of that. I thought yes, and I wrote to them both about it because I really did enjoy it. And the musical examples was great, from Waitress by Sarah Bareilles. So I didn't know that she wrote the music to that, but it was great to hear that example too. That was a fantastic example.
For sure.
I think Lee Van Handel was in that too, right? Was in the poster.
She might have chaired it, actually.
No, not that one. That was
That was a different session. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was. Well, it's kind of funny with the 2 weekends. Like,
it runs together.
It kind of runs all together.
Lee was in the Gary Karpinski session, and she had the great discussion of like cognitive load.
Growth mindset was in there too.
Growth mindset, yes, and stereotype threat. So she talked about how music majors often come in, and if they are at all bad at oral skills to begin with, they feel like, oh, I clearly can't do this, right? Which that and growth mindset go hand in hand. But I loved that. I had never thought about the fact that by not giving the students any information when you do melodic dictation, that could like send the cognitive load meter off the chart. But her argument was that melodic dictation, or getting the full answer, is not the goal, right?
Right.
Which really made me think about that task. And of course, again, because of convenience, a lot of times I do give them the key and the number of measures and all of that. So much easier. Because it's in the book, and I say turn to page 53 and we're going to do number 4, right? And so
but I was thinking about that because we were listening to a song and with my wife, and I don't remember what it was, and my wife's a musician, a really great musician, choir director, and I kind of pick out some solfege, and she knows her solfege really well, but she's like, how did you hear that was the tonic? Like that was do and that was fa and whatever. But I'm like, I don't like, it just sounds like home, that note, right? And that's and like I just realized in that moment, like, I have no way of describing that, but that's actually what our students will experience if they ever do any type of kind of ear training or anything where they're using their ear. They're not going to have a prescribed melody that gives them the meter and the key. No, they're gonna have to just listen and find where that do is. And I don't really know how to teach that, because it seems some students can just get it, and or at least in a very systematic way, like, you just feel it. You kind of hum around, and where does that solid note feel like? Okay, that's going to be your do. But I'm with you there, Jen, is that our exercises that I do, and I do all sorts of exercises where it's like, the keys given or count off and things.
I always count them in.
Yeah.
Every time I did it
the
in
count
this
off.
last couple weeks, every time I did it, I thought,
Yeah.
what am I doing?
I know.
I
Yeah.
should just start.
Well, when I was in that breakout room with the Gary Karpinski one, I was with two former students of Gary, and so they're
wow.
they're like Karpinskyites, I guess. I don't know, but they're like, yeah, we don't give the notes, we don't give like anything. It's just like you're going in, which I agree is like this cognitive load, like weight, but that's what students have to be able to do if they're wanting to apply this to actual lived reality.
Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to, I think our theory-centered ideas make us think that getting an accurately notated transcription is the goal, but actually learning how to figure out where do is, how to feel the meter, how to figure out what scale degree you've started on, how to find, which pulse feels, because sometimes even, especially in popular music, sometimes I'll have students I'll say, clap the beat. And some of them clap what I think is the beat. And some of them clap the divided beat. And some of them are twice as long, right? Because they're all feeling kind of different patterns in there. So all of that is actual perception over the written notated skill, right?
And do you even know how that pop tune is notated in the first place?
Right.
Likely not.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Rothstein would only clap every 4 bars.
Right. Yes.
You're never wrong then, I guess.
Never wrong. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the question then, of course, is how do we assess the real goal of the activity if some of them perhaps perceived a lot but did not notate a complete melody? How do we assess that? How do we weight that? That's the challenge. And I think that's why a lot of us, opt for testing or assessing things like, did they notate it correctly? Because it's easier and we don't have clear answers for how to do it another way.
Yeah.
Or it's so individualized that you have 60 students, and in order to test everyone individually for 10 minutes takes 600 minutes or whatever it is.
Exactly.
It's just an insane amount of time that a lot of us don't have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
well,
tough.
even, I'm teaching Oral Skills 3 right now. There are 9 of them. I'm sorry to everyone who just heard that and got really mad at me.
9?
I'm really sorry, but there are 9
you
of them.
You have 9
Single
sections
digit.
of oral skills?
I have 9 students in Oral
geez.
Skills 3. I know. But, even this week, there are a large number of them in quarantine. And so meeting it face to face became impossible. So we're fully online this week with that group. And I did one-on-one coachings with them. And even with just 9 students, one-on-one coachings took 3 times the amount of normal time that class time would take. I think it was time really well spent. Several of them told me they got a ton out of it and that they had never really, there were certain aspects of their sight reading they'd never really thought about before that I could kind of coach them on or encourage them how to do that better next time. But still, the amount of time is crazy. And if I had any more than 9 students, I might not have been able to make it happen. So yeah, exactly. The individual aspect is really challenging.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah, that makes it tough. I've been grading recorded sight singing melodies all day today.
For days.
Yeah. And so
Even
hear
with
ya.
just 9, I'm in the same boat. Like listening to every rhythm and every yeah, exactly.
Well, what else did we attend and over
There
the
was
couple
the
weekends?
open education resources session, which really made me think our textbook that we use is quite expensive. Now they use it for 4 semesters, so across 4 semesters that maybe evens out the cost. But the open resources idea and the level of accessibility that it affords people, I thought was a really fantastic one. I enjoyed that session a lot.
Yeah, I did too. And that's something my university is certainly pushing and encouraging. We have a minority majority campus. So, and we have a lot of first generation students. And so we have students who are transfers or come from community colleges, commuting. So students from a variety of kind of economic and social backgrounds. And so, OERs, open educational resources. Okay, there we go. OERs, there we go.
Yep.
It's something I've been thinking about. And I haven't mentioned this actually to either you two, but we have a large music therapy program, and the therapy faculty are totally reimagining the therapy curriculum at TWU. And one of the things is they are going to be getting rid of the requirement for Theory 4 and Oral Skills 4, and then we're going to have a different kind of applied music theory class, basically, for Theory 4. And I'm like, that's great. And we put the application for submission for the curriculum committee to get that new course, which hopefully will be happening in the fall. But now I'm like, well, what about, these students who are going to be taking this class? Is the textbook that I'm using appropriate? Should I be, I'm not sure how I'm going to approach it, in fact. Because it's going to be more skill-based and more kind of popular music. And I'm actually really excited to get into these topics. But the textbook is one of those things I'm like, boy, I'm not sure if the textbook that we currently have would be necessary for that class. And if that's the case, well, then they're only using it for 3 semesters. And I'm using less of that textbook. And I've also been thinking about taking other things out. And so I'm like, well, it's a big investment on their end. But then, of course, it's a big investment whenever we have to switch textbooks. and that's always
it's
scary.
Investment of time and labor on our parts too.
Oh, absolutely.
Teaching from a new text currently. I am right now in Theory 1, so I'm actually teaching from 2 different books, one in Theory 1 and one in Theory 4.
There.
And teaching from a new text, it takes so much time because there's a certain way that you say something, and then you'll say it in class, and students are like, I couldn't find that definition in the book or whatever, and you're like, well, it's probably not in there.
Right.
So
right.
there's all sorts of kind of challenges that go along with going a new direction. And I appreciated that one of the speakers, and I do not remember who it was, sorry, to that person who did a great job. But one of them mentioned how challenging it was to create resources from scratch and how much time that took early on in the process. And that could be a barrier for some people adopting that resource, although now they're making all of those resources available. So it sounds like it's gotten a lot more robust in the last few years.
It does seem like that, but that's the entry point that's so hard, is that just that startup, because the theory textbooks that we're using, it has all the online materials, has all these other things, has the scores, and the worksheets and all of that. So it's
and if you're overseeing adjuncts, it's helpful to be able to just hand them a complete package and say, this is what we use. Here's all the materials. This is what we cover in Theory 1, 2, 3, 4, Oral Skills 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
Yeah.
So,
I reviewed some of the OER resources, and one of my main comments was really about making the book more anti-racist. Basically, that was kind of my main response to the book. There was some small things, and there was some typos and things that I was able to catch, but this semester for me, the Lates book, I've gotten to use less than 10% of the Lates. And then I'm thinking, well, if I use less than 10%, then I'm allowed to do that through educational fair use at that point. So should I require anyone to purchase that Lates book? And it's a conversation that I think a lot of people are having. And I was talking to actually John Peterson and Brian Jarvis about that as well. They were involved in the OMT2 book that was discussed quite a bit at the SMT. Fantastic project. I just told them how much I liked what they did with it and where it's going. Especially with offering more module-based curriculum and things like that, to be able to pick and choose certain chapters or topics or concepts that don't necessarily follow, here's Theory 1 to 4, quote unquote,
Right.
But instead follow that module-based curriculum that is very adaptable to lots of different institutions.
Right, but just because just being in the textbook, you're kind of compelled. Well, I should probably include that in there, and and this I need to put this in here.
Right.
Is it really necessary, for your students to have to learn this or that? And if you're kind of have that freedom to use these modules to develop your own curriculum that works for your students, that provides the support and gets them where they need to go, I think that's great.
Yeah. The book that's new to me this semester has a whole section on counterpoint. I have traditionally not done counterpoint in my theory classes, but I thought, well, it's in the book. So kind of like you said, Paul, you're like, well, it's there. So I'm going to do it. And as I was hearing like Cantus Firmus come out of my mouth that first day, I thought, what am I doing? And actually, ultimately, there were some elements of it that I really liked, the results of it that I really liked. But at the same time, in the moment, I thought like, I get a certain amount of time. We get a fixed amount of time.
Right.
And is this really how I want to use it?
Yeah.
With my music education and mostly music industry students, do I want to teach them first species counterpoint?
They might be producing a Gregorian chant album. You never know.
They could.
Right?
They could. You're right.
That's
You're right. And they might look back and be like, thank God I learned the term Cantus Firmus from Dr. Weaver in 8 a.m. music theory.
That's right. They're going to really know how to
be.
mix that four species counterpoint. When
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, no. I think that's a really big topic. And I think, and depending on where you're at, it's easier, or more difficult. I'm the only full-time theory faculty. So making a switch like that is a lot on my plate. And just kind of to take all of that under. And it's hard.
It is. I have a full-time colleague, but he is not entirely devoted to music theory. He's partially music theory and partially music business. And so a lot of that falls on me as well, although I'm really grateful for his help and his input because he's done a lot too this semester, and he's testing the book out as well for the first time. But yeah, when you're the only one, or when you're overseeing other people, which Ben you do too in oral skills instruction, any new thing you embark on takes a lot of time and a lot of preparation.
Yeah, it's a lot of rolling out.
Probably much more than our students ever dream.
And it's a lot of like, oh no, you get halfway in, you're like, oh, I didn't realize that was in there, and then it's you learn as you go that first year for sure. Well, we're 45 minutes in.
Wow.
But I've really enjoyed this conversation, and
It's been so good.
And
we didn't even get to the pedagogy for the public session, which was fantastic.
I know. I thought
I loved that session.
Yeah, I did too. And thinking back on it, I was just really excited because of the openness of these of kind of bringing music theory out into the real world, out to the masses. And also, I think there was a strong emphasis on a lot of the presenters on kind of showing the professionalism and the profession as a theorist. Like, this is what we do, and we're not just going to hide behind our office doors. No, we're going to be putting it out there. Oh my goodness, I had her name. I forgot it. She has the music theory staff paper book, and
oh, right, her Instagram channel.
And so
phenomenal.
Right. Yeah. And I actually follow her on Instagram. But I thought that was really inspiring because she's not only providing extra worksheets or little examples, but also kind of showing what her job is and what is it like to be a theorist, an entrepreneur, trying to make it in this world as a musician. And
I loved that too.
And thinking like that's part of what we're trying to educate students. It's not just being able to spell a G chord or to know a certain musical term, but like we're creating musicians, and how are we doing that holistically, not just within our small little area.
Exactly.
But any closing thoughts for you guys? I mean, the one nice thing about it was not the one, but one of the many nice things about the conference was that it was a chance for us to come together and realize that we're not alone in dealing with all this craziness that is this fall semester, that
Yes.
we're all struggling. We're all kind of coming to these problems in the best way that we can, and trying to be flexible and gracious as we can. So it was just nice to like, oh, you're going through that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
The conference has always been rejuvenating for me in that way. It kind of falls always right at a time in the semester where things are, busy or crazy, or starting to, that pressure coming towards finals is right about now. And so I always feel that way at SMT, that it re-energizes me. And I wasn't sure if I would get that this time with the virtual experience, but I totally did. I totally had that same feeling of just community and learning a bunch and thinking a lot about what we do and how can I do it better and all of those things. So way to go, SMT.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. Danny Jenkins, Brian Mosley, Patricia Hall, all the rest, all the team that made this happen. I mean, incredible work. And fantastic.
For sure.
So that's our show. Thank you so much for listening to Note Doctors, the Music Theory and Pedagogy podcast. We will be back with more interviews with professors and teachers who will be dropping all sorts of theory knowledge for your education, edification, and enjoyment. So until then, bye-bye.